because this issue isn't over. Kia ora.
I call the honourable member Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Wasn't a part of the Select Committee, but very pleased to be able to take a short call on this bill. We've heard calls from the opposition, not unsurprisingly, about the minuscule savings. It's a few million here, a few million there. Seems to be a theme that creeps through. The savings we're talking about, Mr Speaker, are in the order of $19.6 million over 4 years, $4.1 million per year ongoing. Yeah, and we hear comments from across the floor, as usual, because they are quite flippant with their regard to taxpayers' dollars, and a few million here, a few million there, soon becomes a few billion here and there, which is pretty much why this country was going into recession in 2007 after 7 or 8 years of their few million here, few million there of the taxpayer's dollar. Mr Speaker, I haven't had an opportunity yet to speak in the Appropriation Estimates Bill debate, but I'm very much looking forward to that. It's my tie. Thank you, Mr Chevelle. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Must have got a bit out of shape after my time in the gym. Mr Speaker, but really what we're talking about here is a continuation of the theme in that budget of 2012, and one of the key planks in that budget, Mr Speaker, is about delivering better public services, and that really is at the heart of what these three bills are about, Mr Speaker. What we're talking about is part of the government's overall program of improving state sector performance, Mr Speaker. And this reflects an ongoing willingness by this government to show some leadership in finding efficiencies and ensuring the very best use of taxpayer dollars in delivering public services, Mr Speaker. Of course, the opposition don't seem to think that that's a very important thing to do, and that pretty much sums up while they're sitting on that side of the House. And to be quite honest, while they spend most of their time opposing, it's a fairly good gauge to members on this side of the House that we're heading in the right direction, something that seems to be fairly well supported by those in the public. When you look at the polls and the 20-point difference that exists between the two major parties, I think that fairly much sums it up, Mr Speaker. This is about efficiency, this is about service delivery, this is about getting better synergy in terms of backroom functions, Mr Speaker, and these are all very important in these tough economic times when we're making sure that we get best bang for buck for the taxpayer. Mr Speaker, I just briefly want to come to the specific, both of the three specific clauses in this. Thank you, Mr Farfoy, for that valuable contribution. The New Zealand Public Health and Disability Act, Part 1 of this bill, Mr Speaker, relates to the establishment of the Health Promotion Agency, HPA, as a Crown agent, and disestablishes the role of the Alcohol Advisory Council, the Health Sponsorship Council and Crown Health Financial Agency. Mr Speaker, in respect of the HPA's alcohol-specific functions, the HPA will be required to have regard to government policy when directed by the responsible minister, rather than being required to give effect to government policy. Mr Speaker, as a former drug educator, I see a great advantage in this and certainly commend this move. The second part, Mr Speaker, the Mental Health Commission Act, relates to the expiry of the Mental Health Commission Act 1998 and the appointment of the Mental Health Commissioner. The Honourable Ruth Dyson made comment about the agreement reached by Dame Jenny Shipley and Helen Clark and their commitment to mental health, and I want to endorse those comments made by the Honourable Ruth Dyson. And actually, what I believe we are doing here, Mr Speaker, is reinforcing the importance of mental health approaches and the responsibility that government must have in this area, this very concerning area, Mr Speaker. Thirdly, if I can just turn to the Charities Act, this is the one that seems to have created the most interest, if I can put it that way, and some of the submitters. The disestablishment of the Charities Commission and the reassignment of functions and duties under the Charities Act to the Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs. There is some call, Mr Speaker, that this will somehow lower the independence and bring it into some murky, dark lands of government departments. Quite simply, Mr Speaker, I don't accept that. I think it's probably more an opportunity for the opposition to try and score a few points where they've failed to in the other areas. They know this is good law, Mr Speaker. They know this is about continuing to drive better efficiencies in our public service delivery. They know this is about better use of taxpayer dollars. They'll oppose it. That's usually a fairly good indicator we're on track, Mr Speaker. This is nothing less than what the New Zealand public expect of us. It's what they deserve of us, Mr Speaker, and I'm very, very happy to commend these three bills to the House.
I call the Honourable Member Chris Farfoe, Talohini.
Talohini, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, for those people watching Parliament TV tonight, just in case they went to get a cup of tea while Mike Sabin was talking, and I don't blame them, I'd just like to remind them what we're actually debating here tonight. We're debating the New Zealand Public Health and Disability Amendment Bill, the Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill, and also the Charities Amendment Bill. But Mr Sabin, in his contribution to those three bills, I would like to remind those people who are watching tonight that we are debating, talked about frontline services and the agenda of this government to make sure frontline services are delivering better for all New Zealanders. Well, I'd just like to remind, or maybe Mr Sabin hasn't read the papers in the last couple of days about the frontline services that have been affected in the education sector. So maybe Mr Sabin might want to go ahead and read the Dominion Post, maybe the local paper up in North